my goal is really simple. Make a difference in the world. That's it.
Power to Live More with Joe Dodds.
Welcome to the Power to Live More podcast, all about productivity, organisation, well-being, energy and resilience. I'm Jo Dodds, and I started this show to enable interesting people to share their stories about how they use their power to live more, and by that I mean to do the stuff that they want to do more than the stuff that they need to or should do. It's about creating a life for yourself where you have the energy, health and space to be happy and fulfilled, spending your time as you'd like, whether that be at work, home or somewhere else entirely. That's your choice.
Hello. My name is Ellie Dodds and I am co-presenter, and today Joe is interviewing Jonathon Aslay. Jonathon was referred to us by Cindy Bidder, our guest on show number 125. Known as America's leading midlife dating and relationship coach, Jonathon is a defender and protector of women's hearts around the world. He helps women transform from attracting Mr. Wrong into finding their Mr. Right. Jonathon, a successful entrepreneur, coach, speaker and author of Amazon #1 new release, What the Heck is Self-Love Anyway? Jonathon is like a guy spy to the male mind who truly understands the way a single or divorced man thinks and acts. He's a master at helping women recognize and distinguish the difference between men who are emotionally unavailable from those who are truly ready for love. Back to the studio.
Today I'm interviewing Jonathon Aslay. Welcome, Jonathon, for joining me.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be sharing with you today.
Lovely. So start by telling us who you are, what you do, and crucially, where you do it.
Okay. Well, who I am, I'm a dating and relationship coach, and if I really kind of look at how I am operating, I'm a dating relationship coach for women that specializes in midlife. And the only reason why I pause there for a moment is that I'm shifting more to being like a life coach. So to incorporate more than just the dating and relationship aspect. So, but that's what I do professionally. And where I do it, I have a home-based business, or I mean, really, it's more of a laptop-based business because I don't have to do it from home. I can do it from anywhere for the most part.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The agreed person still sitting in a caravan, as listeners will know.
Yeah.
So tell us why you do what you do. So you're changing it. Come from you. Presumably didn't grow up saying that you wanted to be a relationship coach.
So why I do what I do? Well, after turning 40 and going through a divorce a little over it feels like decades ago, but I mean about a decade and a half ago, I found myself out in the single world, and I was doing online dating. And to be candid, I got addicted to online dating. I got addicted to the high of connecting with people. And what interestingly happened was I was so addicted, I was just talking to people, or to women, I should say, consistently every day. I mean, through instant message and telephone calls and texting and everything. And I was actually developing friendships with a lot of women online that I would probably never meet because I was talking to them all over the country. And after a while, some women just asked me for advice on how to improve their dating profile. So I just started to give my, the male perspective on helping a woman, change her, improve her dating profile. And then after they did it, I'd get phone calls like weeks later going, oh my God, I met a great guy. Can you read his profile and tell me what you think? And so then I started to give perspective on what I was looking into in the the men's profiles. And I was like, at the time I was prior to that, one point in my life, I dated an internet marketer. She's a transformational coach and actually a very famous one, and I'm not going to share her name publicly. But I got to see her world, and I'm like, God, I'm being asked to help improve online dating profiles, and I was coaching women for free. Like, why not start a business? And I put up a website, Well, first I wrote I'll be candid, I wrote a cheesy ebook called Online Dating Secrets Revealed. And I only say it's cheesy because it was like 30, 40 pages of an ebook. I put it on a website, and then I started to sell some of it. And then I started to get calls to do radio shows and got called to do an interview for a pilot. And I'm like, oh, shoot, this was a hobby. Now it's turning into a business.
And it's moved from being purely relationship coaching into life coaching, you said at the beginning. And how's that transition happen?
Well, the transitions happen for a couple reasons, because the dating conversation to me is getting to be so noisy, and a lot of people are out there are teaching dating techniques, how to do this to get the guy, or how to text a guy back, or what to do when a breakup happens, or what to do when he disappears. And here's the thing, a lot of this advice out there is generalized, and one size doesn't fit all. And so there's a lot of confusion out there. And what I've come to realize is that dating and or being in a relationship can trigger the number one emotional health issue facing, well, I'm here in the United States, but I mean, it could be all over the world. And that is a lack of inner self-worth, a lack of self-confidence, a lack of self-reliance, a lack of self-discipline, a lack of self-esteem. And dating can trigger that. So what my conversation lately has been more about building from the inside out, because whether you are in a relationship or not, what's most important is having a happy you. And I say that capitalized with an exclamation point, Y-O-U. And that's the conversation I'm leaning more into these days from a professional standpoint.
Yeah. No, I can see that. It's interesting thing about the whole concept of relationship coach, because it must be quite a new thing, as in, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 years ago. I can't imagine people would have said that, but people must have been helping people all along. We just didn't have names for it, or we didn't sort of position ourselves in that sort of way. But when you start to move into, as you say, helping people individually with their self-esteem and all that sort of thing, again, we wouldn't have called it that 40 years ago, but people must have been, talking to people and helping people forever.
Well, I think, well, I'd like to talk into that for a couple of reasons. 30, 40 years ago, dating is actually a relatively new phenomenon. It used to be, for thousands of years, you mated with someone just to have sex oftentimes, and then you became in a committed relationship, or there were arranged marriages. And dating has only really been around for the last 40 or 50 years. And what's uniquely different now because of the internet, it's changed everything. Because it used to be you would meet your partner based on proximity. In other words, if they lived in the same town, or you went to the same school, or you worked at the same place, that's where you met your mate. And now, because of the internet, you have access to all these places to meet people. And I think the other thing that changed, Tony Robbins back in the 80s and late 80s and early 90s really was the first one to begin the push of coaching. Not dating coaching, but coaching, right? And so in the last 2 decades, the whole coaching industry in general, the whole home-based business in general has blossomed because of, I think Tony Robbins has been on the forefront of that. And and because of the internet, and because of laptop-based businesses.
Yeah, I think back in I met my husband 17 years ago on the internet, and I was featured in a magazine because it was such an unusual thing to do in those days.
Now almost 50% of couples today are meeting through an online connection, whether it's a dating site, a swipe app, a Facebook, a chat room. And let me clarify this, for the demographics that I talk to, the over 45 crowd, mostly are meeting through some sort of online connection.
Yeah, Yeah. What about in the business world? Do you think there's a lot of getting together of people because they're in the same sort of space? But, not intentionally dating, but people meet because they're working together in some shape or form.
Do you mean, well, are we talking the real world or the virtual world of the laptop-based business?
Yeah, well, I don't know either. I think that's the point, isn't it?
well, here's the thing. For the longest time, there was a good chance, up until about the 1990s, there was a good chance you were going to meet at work. But that was based on proximity. In other words, you saw each other every day, you built some familiarity, there was some comfort, and say, hey, do you want to catch a drink after work? And bump, 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 they ended up getting married kind of thing. In the virtual world, it's a lot different. It's interesting. I've been working with I have a virtual assistant I've been working with for, I want to say 9 years now. And we didn't meet for 7 of those 9 years. And then finally she lives in Michigan and I live in Los Angeles, and she was in Las Vegas doing an event. I go, okay, I'll drive out to meet you. So, I connect with a lot of people virtually. And in my social circle, or at least in my demographic of dating and relationship coach, about 9 years ago, we actually started, the ones here locally, actually decided to get together a couple times a year on a social basis, because we just, it was like so frustrating to work from home and not have connection with other people. So we get together a couple times a year, hang out, find out what you're doing and blah, blah, blah. So it's kind of a mastermind, but it's not really. It's a social mastermind.
Yeah, it's interesting about how, as you say, we build strong relationships online. I remember one of my guests, Wendy Keir, right from the early days of the podcast, came to stay for the weekend a couple of years ago, and we went to a neighbour's party, and they were like incredulous, because actually we'd known each other about 5 years, but we'd never met until like the night before their party. I thought that was very odd. But,
well, one of your guests, Cindy Badar, I've been working with her for, this is the one I was sharing with you earlier. I mean, it took 7 years before we could meet.
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? Yeah. So what about how this works? So how do you work with people? What do your days look like?
That's an interesting question, because, my passion is to help. And I'll be candid, I'm kind of a terrible business person. I think on some level, this is kind of indicative of the coaching industry, if you will. Those of us who really genuinely want to make a difference in a world and really want to help. And one of my weaknesses is that I don't have a systematized business. Now, let me backtrack. When I say weakness, that may not be a fair characterization. And what I mean to say is my day routine, going back to your question, is I do a lot of content creation. I blog, I shoot videos, but I don't do it on any sort of, like, I don't have it on my calendar per se. I do it based on how I feel. And why I'm sharing this with your audience, because I kind of operate my business more from a Zen perspective than a logical perspective. And what I mean by logical, by systematized and goals and that sort of thing. And Joe, partly it's because systems and goals frustrate me. Goals frustrate me because every time I've set a goal, I don't achieve it, and it gets frustrating to me. Like, they say set big goals or set little goals, all that stuff. So my goal is really simple: make a difference in the world. That's it. And I allow trust to navigate my life. But I want to share this with you. It wasn't always that way. It was about 8 years ago when I started this business about 9 years ago. I started doing this 9 years ago. And I had only $50,000 in the bank. And I was literally each month going through my savings, just trying to get this business going. And at first, I was offering coaching for like Starbucks card. Send me a Starbucks card and I'll coach you. And then it was like, I started one of those $1 a minute phone lines, and then at some point I increased it to $2 a minute, and then I increased it to $3 a minute. That was like how I was bringing in income. And my focus was helping people bring it and bring in income. But I created a mantra for myself, and my mantra was simple. My monthly income exceeds my monthly expenses. My monthly income exceeds my monthly expenses. And then in about 2011, I'll never forget this. This was November of 2011. And I kept saying this mantra for 6 months straight. My monthly income exceeds my monthly expenses. And I focused on being happy when I said it. November 2011 was the first month that my income exceeded my expenses. And then the next month, my income exceeded my expenses. And the next month. And all along the way, I began increasing my expenses. And at some point within a year, my expenses had doubled, and so had my income. My income exceeds my monthly expenses. And I realized that for years, I operated based on goals and worry. Would I make the money? I was constantly worried. And when I let go of worry, the money just started to arrive. And so I operate, that's why I said earlier, I kind of operate from a Zen perspective. What's my objective? I want to make a difference in the world. That's how I get up in the morning. How can I make a difference in someone's life? And when I say the world, let me make that, because that's so, macro. Let me bring it to the micro. How can I make a difference in one person's life today? Is kind of the way I operate. And I trust that the revenue will find its way to me. Now, I know a lot of people listening would go, wow, that's a lot of woo-woo and blah, blah, blah. It took me a long time to trust. But now I literally know that the universe has my back.
So, you said before we started, you said, I don't really have systems. Do you really want to interview me? And, my comment was, this is about, us all sharing all different ways of being. And I sort of get what you're saying. I mean, I keep listening to people saying that sort of to organise your tasks, you should block out your calendar, and if it's not on your calendar, it doesn't get done, and all this sort of stuff. And I've tried that in the past, and it never works for me because I hate that structure. I have to have much more fluidity. I wouldn't say I go as far as your fluidity, but
now
well,
I was going to say, I do work with my virtual assistant, and I've worked with other, I have people that help me with writing and such like that. So I have a little team, if you will. On some level, we have a structure the way we work together. And for the most part, we've set it up such that I made it such that I created it very simple. In other words, rather than creating a complex business with a lot of moving parts, I just make it simple, which allows me to navigate from this Zen perspective. I mean, if I had a business with a lot of moving parts, and I don't mean that literally, I mean that figuratively, right?
Yeah.
Then that would require much more attention and more systems. I've intentionally created a very simple way of how my business is run. And but I will tell you, I'll be candid with you. I'm going through a shift, as I was sharing with you and your audience, shifting kind of from the dating conversation, which requires me I'm going to do an overhaul to my website. I'm going to do many changes. And this is going to require, doing some systems, right? But I leverage the people that are better at doing this stuff than me. And that's one of the keys, is being able to utilize the resources around me, like my virtual assistant and my website person and that sort of thing. Because they're better at those systems than I am.
Yeah. So you've mentioned that, and you've mentioned working with a VA over a number of years, and also we're talking about that whole sort of fluidity thing. How do you ensure that they know what they need to do and that you know that they've done it or not, given, there is that flexibility?
It's interesting. And sometimes my assistant, I don't like even using the term assistant because she's really a business professional. So I'll just say my partner, if you will. I mean, even though it's not really business partners, I feel like there's a partnership there. For a while there, I used to nitpick, like I'd send something and I didn't get a response back, and I'd nitpick kind of, did things get done? It took me a while to let go of that kind of anal retentive part of me. And because we use some apps like, what it's shared calendar or some other, types of apps, but I'm terrible at technology. I mean, look what happened. You and I couldn't get on Go. I couldn't get on Go Meeting to do it. Now we have to do it on Zoom. You know what? My team that I've been working with has been with me so long that we've just built trust with one another. I literally just know they'll get it done. And the other day, we did have a glitch the other day. Something didn't get done, and it turned out I thought I'd sent an email, and I kept emailing him. I go, "Did you get this done?" He goes, "What are you talking about?" And I realized my email had been sitting in the draft folder. I never hit send. It's so rare, though, because I have built trust. And built trust, but I just trust. And, here's the bottom line. There's always going to be mistakes. But when you put together a team that really has your back, you know what? Rather than, at least for me, I've let go of that picky part and just operate, like I said, more zen. And things just, when you operate from a place of everything is going to work out for you, life just becomes a lot simpler and easier. At least it is for me.
Yeah. So, any tips for enabling that to happen? I mean, you talked about trust, but you literally, you look for somebody to work with you, and that doesn't happen overnight. How do you develop that?
So, well, first, when I was introduced to my, my assistant partner, however you want to call it, it was through a referral. Yeah. And I trusted the referral. So that was like the first thing. And it took us a little while to get to know each other. It's almost like dating. I mean, a relationship with someone you're working with is very much like dating. And so it took a little bit of time to get to know each other and to, work together. And one of the things I did was I didn't mind investing a little more money by having a weekly or bi-weekly meetings. And we used to schedule a 30-minute meeting just to check in with each other. And we did this for years. And it got to a point where we go, we don't need these meetings. We have already built this rapport with each other. We started to then shift to like first it was twice a week, then it was once a week, then it was once a month kind of thing. Like, in other words, it was, the relationship was a separate entity. And it started off by dating each other first to get to know one another. And now we built, rapport and trust with each other that I don't even give it a second thought. But that took time. It's very much like a relationship. And I think what's most important, there was a give to each other. And I say this, it was important, it's very important because I gave in the relationship, and not just the money piece, I gave, there was an emotional piece attached. And I genuinely can say, I love my VA. I say that to her, I love you. and since love is a message from me on a professional level, that's so important to me. Like, when I said earlier, I'm here to make a difference in the world and make a difference in someone's life, what I mean by that is that comes from a place of love. And many people, a lot of people throw around the words, I love you, and but very few people I've come to realize recognize the real power of love when you just come from a loving place in your heart. And that's what I'm here to kind of be both a message for, and I've been able to establish that in the business relationships that I have.
Yeah, yeah. So changing the subject a little bit and going back to the fact that you're in LA.
Yeah.
What about keeping healthy? From over here, we think LA's like the real place to to really look after yourself. Is that generically true? And what about for you?
Well, this is a great question because, here in the United States, our country is a very unhealthy country on so many different levels, and I've done a lot of research on food and health, and I've come to realize, and this isn't systemic of just Los Angeles, or Los Angeles tends to be like, if you don't have six-pack ab and a beautiful body, you're rejected is the impression.
Yeah.
But I've watched a lot of documentaries at the beginning of this year about food, and I've come to realize that processed foods are very unhealthy for us. And so I actually shifted the way I view food back in February of this year, and I, within 2 months, lost 25 pounds. I'm actually almost at the weight I was when I graduated college, and which was 30 plus years ago. And why I'm sharing this with you is, health. Oh, and by the way, physically, everything inside of me changed. And one of the main things that changed, I had high blood pressure. I had blood pressure of 170 over 110. Like, it was bad. And I was seeing doctors and I was taking medicine, and the medicine wasn't doing anything. I changed my diet. Now my blood pressure is 130 over 85. Like, I'm literally, for my age, at perfect blood pressure by just changing the way I eat. And because of that, I have more vitality, I have more energy. And by the way, this is a little bit of, I'm on the bandwagon on really promoting an understanding about how food is fuel. And most people think of food as comfort. And I shared with you earlier, I'm here to kind of spread a message of love. I wrote a book that was published this year and actually made Amazon bestseller for new releases, called What the Heck is Self-Love Anyway? And it's about loving oneself and loving others. And really kind of, and when I say loving oneself, I mean self-worth, self-confidence, self-reliance, self-esteem, those self-words. And one of the chapters in it is called Your Body is a Machine, Not a Temple. and why I'm sharing this is because health is an important part of self-love, self-worth. And there's another chapter in there called Be a Good Steward of Your Money, because we're talking about business and money. So money, physical health, all are equations to our happiness, like a relationship would be. So I'm a huge proponent of encouraging education on understanding the importance of how food is fuel and not for comfort.
Yeah. It's interesting. I saw on Facebook yesterday a picture of a beach in the 1970s, and the person was making the comment that there wasn't the level of obesity, in those days. It's interesting how much things have changed in, such a short space of time. And as you say, it's the food that we're eating, in the main, from everything that I've also researched as well, as opposed to necessarily how much of it we're eating intentionally, as in we know the food industry are trying to get us to eat lots, so we do because that's what the food's making us do, as opposed to because we've all just got out of control, really. You brought up something really huge, and that is I was watching a documentary about an Aborigine tribe that up until 50 years ago was the healthiest people on the planet, kind of thing. And 50 years ago, they introduced a convenience store nearby. And we're talking about, and so their health dramatically dropped to being one of the sickest people on the planet
because at this convenience, because in the past they hunted for their food and they ate from the earth, and now they're like, you could see them drinking bottles of Mountain Dew and eating potato chips, and all of a sudden their entire health dropped, and now there's scientists coming in to trying to heal them, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And when I saw that, I came to realize, again, the importance of recognizing that food is fuel and not for comfort.
Yeah, absolutely. So what about learning and improving yourself? You clearly help your clients to do that in one shape or another, and you've just shared already something that you've been learning this year. How do you do that on an ongoing basis?
I love this question, because when I wrote my book, What the Heck is Self-Love Anyway? It's really an invitation at the end for a person to begin a personal development, self-help, and spiritual practice. And when I use the word spiritual, I don't mean religious. I just mean self-discovery. Mm-hmm. And in my personal life, I invest hours in both myself and learning. In other words, when I say myself, is recognizing when ego is in my, when ego is blocking love. In other words, I'm not coming from a loving place, I'm coming from an egoic or fear-based place. So I work on it by reading a lot of books and being part of a daily morning study group. And I probably watch at least 1 or 2 hours a day of documentaries I'm going to use the word better myself, but just, to tap into more happiness in my life, because I feel like the antidote to suffering, in other words, suffering is the reason why we're not why people aren't happy, and the antidote to that is love and learning. Tony Robbins, I mentioned him earlier, has what he calls the hour of power. I spend more than that, but I encourage everyone to at least invest 15 minutes a day, whether it's meditation, whether it's watching a documentary, doing something, because I think that's a lot better than watching the Kardashians. I understand the value of entertainment, but happiness starts from investing in oneself. And what's sad as a country here, at least, and I don't know what's like in the UK and other places, the investment is most people invest outside of themselves, and then they wonder why they're miserable.
Yeah, interesting. I was talking to somebody earlier about who'd got a bit of money to spend on something, stuff, whatever. And I was sort of counselling and saying, it doesn't go very far. Don't spend it on stuff.
Yeah.
And spend it on asset, things that would be classed as assets, like learning and things that are going to help you to be happier or more well off or whatever in the future. Because it's so easy just to spend money on, or spend your time on things that are fun in the moment but don't actually move anything forwards for you.
Can I share something really personal that might help illustrate this?
Please do.
So I shared with you, I went through a divorce and I began dating, I kind of fell into this dating coaching business. What happened to me during that time is I went through a divorce. I lost my $250,000 sales job at the same time. And then a few years later, the market crash of 2008 financially wiped me out. I literally, at one point, was living in a $2 million home. And I then had to, at 45, had to move in with my mom and dad. And they lived in a retirement community. I mean, I went from being a millionaire to, remember I shared I had like $50,000 left in the bank account. I was doing this. Mm-hmm. During that time, I saw the movie The Secret, and 2006. And then I watched What the Bleep. And then I started to read books on personal development and self-help. And I just kept feeding my soul, just kept feeding it. And as a way to kind of heal from the inside out, because I was in so much pain and suffering over losing my money, losing my marriage, losing, being in shame that I had to live with my mom and dad in a retirement community. By the way, I subsequently moved out 5 years later, and I now live at the beach with an ocean view, and I drive a convertible. So why I'm
feeling better now. Yeah.
Why I'm sharing this with you is last year I suffered one of the most traumatic events in my life. I lost my 19-year-old son to an accident. And if anyone who's a parent listening to this, I would probably say that the worst thing that you can happen in your life is losing a child. And whether you're a parent or not, most everyone can empathize with that. And I can tell you, I lived 19 years of his life worrying that something would happen to him. I lived in constant worry. And then boom, what I worried about happened. What was fascinating to me, I always thought that would take me down the rabbit trail of, no return. In other words, emotionally no return, physically no return. And I recognized that it was my personal development, self-help, spiritual practice that prepared me for this traumatic event. And actually it inspired the book that I wrote. I actually, 2 months after this happened, I began writing about self-love, not really knowing what it was. I was just writing what I was feeling. And then 9 months to the date of him passing, I published it. A month later, it was Amazon bestseller. And during the writing period, I realized that the vaccination or antidote to, suffering and chaos is working on oneself. Actually improving and bettering oneself not from the egoic place, but from a love-based place, and I use the word egoic because no offense to anyone who likes watching the Kardashian, that's your ego being fed. That's not feeding your soul. That's a distraction to the pain in life. And my invitation is to lean into the pain, work through the pain. So when something like this happens, and it doesn't have to be the death of a child. It could be a loss of a relationship. It could be a loss of a family member or something else, or it just could be that something happened at work, whatever it is, you're prepared for it. And I feel like that foundation of personal development has helped me create my own sovereignty, to use an English word.
Yes.
And while I can't say that, I haven't been in pain over his loss, I certainly have a lot of pain, I didn't go down the rabbit hole of despair.
No. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I've just come up to the last couple of questions of the interview. And normally I ask, what do you do on a day where it all goes horribly wrong? I'm not going to ask you that because I think you've gone some way to answering that in that story. What about on the flip side, on those days where you feel like you've had the chance to live more, and that's where I talk about get to do more of the stuff that you want to do and less of the stuff that you feel you have to do or you should do. What do your days look like?
What does my days look like?
Yeah, where you've been living more, where you've been doing the things you really want to do.
So I love this question because I start each morning with a slight bit of relaxation and meditation. I tend to get up around 5:30 every morning. I start with that, and then I briefly do a bit of work for about an hour. It could be blogging, it could be writing, it could be shooting some videos for my group. And then I have from 8 a.m., I'm missing it today, but at 8 a.m. every morning I do a study group around self-love. And I actually do that while I walk. So I actually live by the ocean. I walk the beach every morning. I try to get a 4 or 5 mile walk in. And then I come back and I do a little bit of work. I do a bit of studying. And then depending on what my calendar looks like for private coaching clients, I have create a lot of space for that. But I operate when I think I forgot who wrote the book, The 4-Hour Work Week. I can't think of his name right now. I kind of operate. Tim Ferriss, yeah. I kind of operate from the premise of a 4-hour work day. In other words, that's it. Now I'm sharing this with you because I used to work in the corporate world. I'd go into an office every morning, and I would literally be there 10 hours. But if I actually calculated my actual work time, it probably was less than 3. A lot of it was just bullshit, talking, shuffling papers, doing stuff that made it look like I was busy, but I was there just to physically have a presence. I'm not saying all days were like that, but a lot of days were like that. So what's most important is I put in quality time of work, not quantity.
Yeah.
And that allows for a ton of self-reflection. And I communicate with my circle of friends throughout the day. I stay connected to my community. I nurture my soul because it's part of what my gift is, to be out there to teach. Is my own journey is what I want to share with people. And I'm grateful to be able to share this with your community, because hopefully maybe someone else might shift from a grind work day to coming from a place of love, which actually opens you up to more hours in the day.
Thank you. It's been a really interesting interview because, as you said before we started, it's different to a lot of the interviews, and it's been, as you say, a lot about love and about self-development and self-reflection, which has been really interesting. So thank you, Jonathon. Thanks so much for sharing that. Tell people how they can find out more about you and get in contact with you.
Well, Joe, real quick, I want to thank you so much. You're a great interviewer, and I really just, I love the energy you put out. You have just you have great energy, and I just wanted to say that out loud, and for those listening, okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome. So my website is jonathanaslay.com. There might be a link somewhere here. And
there will be in the show notes.
Yeah. And my book is called What the Heck is Self-Love, which if you went to selflovethebook.com, you can check it out. It's a passion project for me, and I believe that it's a doorway for anyone who reads it to begin a real practice of loving on oneself. And I'm a big proponent of that. So, and then you can find me on social media, that sort of thing as well, just by Googling my name.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jonathon.
Thank you.
All this information is available in the show notes. If you go to the link powertolivemore.com/, in this case 129, then you'll find those notes there. And this week I want to talk about the concept of productive procrastination. It's something that I read about in an article this week published by Zapier, who are the people who provide a platform where you can create automation within your business. And it's something that I've talked about before. It's something that I do, and I've sort of identified as being something that I do. I think we all do it, and it's good to do more of this and less of the just procrastination stuff. But I thought it was worth sharing because there's some great examples in the article of things that fit within the title of productive procrastination. So firstly, what is it? So I've always said that, we do all procrastinate. It's a natural thing that we do. But actually, if you can procrastinate by doing something else that's important, perhaps not quite as important as whatever it is you're supposed to be doing, because clearly that's probably urgent as well as important. But if you can do something else that's important too, then at least you're doing something that in the end will be useful to you, even if it wasn't supposed to be what you were doing right now in the moment. So, for example, if I was supposed to be writing a blog post today and I decided that I didn't want to do that, but I recorded an outro for next week's podcast instead, then it's something that's important. It's something that needs to be done. It doesn't need to be done right now. But if I'm not going to write the blog post that I ought to be writing, then at least doing something that's going to be useful to me in a few days' time would be a better use of my time than sitting in front of the telly and not doing anything else productive. So some of the examples that they've used in the article are, so one of them is about planning
the rest of your day. So the guy was saying that sometimes he doesn't feel like getting started on a project, so sometimes he just takes a few moments to plan the rest of his day out, perhaps writing a list of articles that he's going to write, or the order of events for the day and the things that he's going to achieve that day. And that, even though that's not doing the work that he's supposed to be doing, it does help to shape the rest of his day, and perhaps might lead him into doing that first task. Who knows? He's also suggests breaking the project you don't want to start into smaller pieces, and that's sort of you're doing that instead of actually doing the project. But by breaking that project down into smaller pieces and planning out those smaller pieces of work, then that sort of gets you halfway towards perhaps doing some of them, or at least starting with one of them. So that can be useful as well. So another option is to clean something, and this is where I first discovered my propensity to productively procrastinate. And that was 30 years ago, when I was doing an evening course at a local university, and I was supposed to be doing my assignments, and instead of doing my assignments, I used to get a really big urge to clean my oven. Not something that I ever get the urge to do under normal circumstances, but it did used to happen when I was supposed to be studying. And if you're looking at it from a productive procrastination point of view, then if that's what I chose to do, at least I'd end up with a clean oven at the end of it, which doesn't happen very often, I can assure you. Another suggestion that he uses is about tackling the simplest part of your work for the day, just as a way of doing something that you intend to do today, and something that's sort of quicker and easier for you to do because it's the easiest bit, and at least then you're doing something that's going to need to be done during the day, and you're doing that now rather than whatever it is that you feel like you should be doing. And actually that's quite often how I start my day. I start with the easy, quick things that I can quickly tick off my list, and that's not what many productivity people say. They say you should eat the frog, you should do the worst thing first, so that's out of the way, and then the rest of the day has got to get better from that point, if you like. But particularly because I'm a bit of a night bird, a wolf, if you've read the Power of When, I get up and I don't want to do important big pieces of work. It's not my time in the morning, so I'd rather just do stuff that needs to be done but is easier and quicker to do. So I do tend to start with all the sort of piddly things, and then as the day goes on, I pick up the bigger items later on. Another suggestion was about to go for a walk or do other exercise, and if you're stuck and you're supposed to be doing something and you really don't want to do it, if you go for a walk, at least at the end of it you've had some exercise, you've probably had an opportunity to think about stuff, and you might have come up with some renewed enthusiasm for the rest of your day. And so that sort of taking exercise instead of doing what you're supposed to be doing can be really helpful. And then they finish off, not surprisingly, by saying, how about automating something? Which, of course, is what they do. So I guess that's a nice end to the blog post. But, again, if you're stuck and you don't know what to do next, and you think about something that you do within your business that can be automated, and you automate it in the moment as a way of avoiding doing the thing that you really ought to be doing, then at least sort of moving forwards, whatever this thing is that you've automated is actually going to give you sort of, much more return than the period of time that you spent on it. A reason to automate things within your business already, but also a good use of that sort of time. If you're going to not do the thing that you need to do, then if you, use an automation task or the setup of an automation task as the thing that's stopping you doing the big thing, at least, next week and next month and next year, the work that you get as a result of that automation will continue happening. So actually, it is a really good use of your time, even if it isn't really what you're supposed to be doing right now in the minute. So it was really interesting to see that article, because it is something that I do and I have suggested to people. Obviously, just procrastinating generally and always, it's not going to get the work done. But certainly, if you think about in the moment things that you could usefully be doing, even when you don't want to do the thing that you need to do, at least at the end of the half an hour or an hour you've spent on whatever that item is, will have been useful to you. for, the future, rather than just wasting that time, faffing around on Facebook or whatever, trying to avoid doing whatever it is you need to do. So that's today's little nugget, thinking about productive procrastination and how you can make your procrastination more productive in your business and in your life. Just to finish, to let you know, the membership site that I keep talking about, Power to Live More Calm, which is for home-based coaches and consultants, offering community, accountability, learning, and various materials, templates, and so on. This week I've added a new course on there, which is all around WordPress security. So if you manage your own website and you're a home-based coach or consultant, then you might be interested in finding out more. Please do go to powertolivemore.com/get calm, and you can find out more there, and or get in touch with me, joe@joedodds.com. And again, the show notes for this week's show are at powertolivemore.com/129, and we look forward to speaking to you next week.
Use your power to live more.